to, again, using sensors, right? A coffee shop like CCD, right, would figure out that a customer's walked in, spent 15-20 minutes. So your usual coffee, whatever your stuff, right, is already ordered, right? So this is the additional, this is the system raises alerts on you, and tells you that so and so customer in the store spent around 20 minutes now, so the dwell time threshold has crossed. This is the time the customer decides to either get up and walk out or stay for one more transaction. So that's when you additionally incentivize and say, listen, coffee ho gaya, why don't you try our dessert, and we give you some good offer on dessert or a samosa or whatever, right? So that's how some chains are using that. And finally, for social endorsement. So consumers who come to your store and walked out after spending a good amount of time leading to a transaction or whatever, are the people to really ask for social endorsement. So instead of asking everybody and anybody saying, recommend us on Facebook or review us on Zomato or whatever, right? Instead of getting those bad reviews, you only get reviews from people who actually engage with your brand, right? For some brands like jewelry or high-end watches and so on, right, there aren't many transactions happening in a day, probably one or two, right? But the value of transaction is very high. Every person who comes in and buys, right, buys stuff worth 70,000, 40,000, the product value is very high, right? So in that case, the same systems could alert the store manager and say that this person who just walked into the store is Mr. Sridhar, and last time was there on so and so date, and you look up the point of sale and figure out this is the transaction history. Even if the owner of the shop is not in the store, outside, they get an alert, and they can call back and engage better with the customer, right? So all of this, right? So a lot of stuff happening, all with the same aim that they want to get more, give more value to the consumers, and in the process extract more value out of the consumer, right? So if you are in the business of technology, a lot of opportunity. You can do bunch of this stuff, you can enable and so on. Well, if you're not, if you're a consumer, right, good luck to you. I mean, or just sit back, relax, and have a iced decaf double venti soy latte. You have a lot of choice, but that's about it. Your wallet, you can't save it for too long. It's just going to disappear. So that's about it. I think I'm done with this. So thanks a lot for hearing me out. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
So I said that it was a nice presentation in terms of there are many situations or dependencies, of the variables, which has to be taken into account for a retailer, to decide why we have a kind of attrition or retention or XYZ, impacts. So my question to you is, as a solution provider, as a provider to, like, vendor to a retailer, I seem them to be on-fly slash real-time variables. It's coming on-fly. So how do you manage to accommodate such a complex, because it's not easy, because someday my shop can open at 6 a.m. I mean, it's not, it's difficult, I mean, if you see technically.
Yes, that example, and and Mr. Sridhar, I mean, you tell Mr. Sridhar is in the store to a shopper's shop, what the hell are they going to do with it, right? I mean, there are so many people there. So some of them are applicable only to certain retailers. They are not applicable to everyone. I just try to share a variety of ways in which all of this, by the way, all the examples that I gave are already happening. They are not, sci-fi, your refrigerator ordering the, milk kind of examples. There are things that are happening. Not everything is applicable to everyone.
No, my question is, like, I want to understand, I mean, that is fine. I want to understand, like, majority of providers who in retail space or other spaces, they have more or less have predefined, variables. They can increase or decrease, but it takes time. I mean, do you suggest, like, or do you know about it, like, how can we have on-fly inclusion of variables on real time? That's a really challenging and an important problem statement. That, my code should automatically be including or excluding the variables depending on the situations to come. That's my code should learn itself, right? I mean, how should you do that? Why should I freeze my variables always?
So today the learning, a lot of the learning or insights, actionable insights that we talk about are, it's real time, but it's not as real time as it probably appeared in the slides, right? Some of them are, but what happens is you also need to capture enough data to generate an insight or actionable thing, right? So some things like your traffic measurements and so on, right, are done over a period of time. You measure it continuously, and see for a few weeks to realize that that particular Monday when you saw a drop in bounce rate or whatever, right, was not an exception. It's more of a trend. To identify that, yes. So we using tools, we using mobile based tools to provide these insights or feed them back into the retailers and so on. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
To some extent, yes.
Yeah. So yeah. So real time,
It's more, see, it's more or less a streaming sourcing, right? So that's my question is like, it's more or less streaming analytics, which has to be a demand nowadays. I mean, nobody is really, wishing to have waiting for the entire week or day to, to store data and that
yes.
analytics.
So it depends. I'm saying there are multiple insights. Some of them are streaming in real time. So for example, if you're a large store, a Walmart or a Target, somebody mentioned, right? If you're in a store where, if you're seeing a lot of traffic for some reason in the section where iPad is present, right? Now, you anticipate demand and you are already staffing for it, but there are always going to be times when your staff is not ready for it, right? So in scenarios like that, the insight is real time. It alerts the backend system somewhere and say, listen, we're detecting that there are around 30 people in the electronics experience section, while you only have 2 of your staff present there, right? That kind of
Does
thing
it
is
come into category of triggering or event processing? We have some event processing engines which can trigger immediately to the maybe store manager or maybe the store owner, and he can take action immediately. I mean, suppose you are taking action after the customer leaves your store, then what's the point behind it? You should take action when he is still at the mall at least, so you can call back and hey, I'll come back.
True. Yeah, true. So for some insights, we try to do that. It's not possible always for us to provide or for anyone.
Yeah, I know it's difficult, but yeah, it's doable.
Yeah. Sure. Anything else or? Yeah, or lunch. Sorry. Yeah.
Hi, I have two questions. One, you talked about data bounce and bounce rate, right?
Bounce rate, yeah.
Bounce rate and the example of Mr. Sridharan. My first question is, how do you tag it at an individual customer level as opposed to a crowd level that 50 people came in, 25 walked out? That's my first question. The second question is, you gave an example of the window A/B
A/B testing for Windows, yes.
Change.
Yeah.
Obviously, there will be a lot of other variables that might have caused a spike in the sales that may have coincided with your window change. So how do you cut out the noise and narrow it down to say that this window change has resulted in more footfalls or more sales?
Okay, yeah, I'll take both of them. See, tagging individual customers is a difficult problem, right? But it's solvable. In some cases, it's probably not worth solving. So for example, again, if you're talking a big bazaar kind of a store, right, you don't individually want to know, you're not offering a premium experience, and with the amount of crowd that you're going to sit, there's no point doing, because you're not treating them any different. Knowing whether it's Mr. Sridharan doesn't help big bazaar in any which way, probably because the users come to do the same grocery transactions, right? But like I mentioned, for cases like jewelries and watches and so on, it's important because the store, is in the same mall. The door of the store opens probably 5 times in a day, right? Because people are passing by and rarely people come into the store. So every event is important event, so to speak. For that kind of a retailer, if technology can provide answer and say that this is Mr. Sridharan, it's very important. So one, there's a use case. Then you come to how do you do that? There are multiple ways. One, mobile app is a good way. For example, if you delivered if the user carries a decathlon or whatever, your store app, right, then you can identify, or like in the previous thing somebody mentioned, right, the Wi-Fi signals also carry the MAC ID of the phone, which is unique, right? So first time the user comes in, you don't know that this is Sridhar, right? But you know that a transaction happened at the same time. Now when the same user comes back and does another transaction, right, you know that what's the probability or chance that out of billions of MAC IDs, right, this particular one was present in my store at the same time when Mr. Sridharan was present, right? So you tag them somehow, right? The other thing about the window conversion, There's noise, surely there's noise, but for window conversion alone, we're not measuring how many transactions happen. We're not looking at point of sale at all. Retailers are not looking at point of, they're just saying at any point of time you roughly know that there are around 200 people close to my store who can maybe visually see my store, right? That's the range, right? And within a given period of time, how many of those really end up? Typically it's 1 to 2%, right? But with any change, if you're seeing spikes or drops, right? So you try out, because you know a reason somebody walking past your window, why do they come in? It really depends on very few. You know, I would be happy if people made lists at home saying that, you know, I'm going to L showroom to buy a, you know, blue color thing, right? At least with my wife that never happened. You walk past and you see something at the window, the color, the discount offer, the Diwali theme, something attracts and which makes them get inside this particular store, right? So you constantly measure the conversion rates and do that. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Okay.
Right, so many thanks, Hemant. Yeah, we'll be breaking for lunch now. What I would request is if we can cut short the lunch break for from 1 hour to 45 minutes, I would highly appreciate it. This is in the best interest of time. And for the post-lunch session, we have a swap. The one between 2:15 to 3 will be held between 3 to 3:45. So in other words, Dr. Amrish will be presenting the first, and Devdut Mukherjee will be presenting next, soon after. So there's a session swap. Thank you.